I'll call the meeting to order. Before we start, let me read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you have reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and proceed quickly away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles. With that out of the way, you had the minutes distributed in your packets. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If there are none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Before we start into the full agenda, there was an item on your desk with the request to add to the agenda tonight, which is an item which we addressed last month's meeting out in Laurel Valley. But there's been some changes to that. Do I have a motion to add Laurel Valley plat under item D, hearings, be item 3? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. First thing on the agenda is a site plan review, White Auto Sales. Roger?
This site plan is for an automobile sales lot to be located at 3029 411 South. The property is identified on tax map 78, parcel 51, and is located within the commercial zone. The property has an old motel currently located on it, but this structure will be removed and a sales office will be located in the same location. The site plan does indicate that all building setbacks will be met. The existing entrance from 411 will be used to access the lot, which will be gravel. The proposed office will be 1,400 square feet with a 12-feet concrete pad around the building. The properties abutting each side are zoned commercial and will not require buffering. The property behind this property is zoned S, suburbanizing, and will not require additional buffering as long as the existing vegetation is maintained. The site plan does not indicate the location of a business sign, so a sign permit will be required prior to the sign being placed on the lot. The proposed area of disturbance is less than an acre and does not require a grading permit. If actual grading exceeds 1 acre, then a grading permit will be required locally and a SWIP will be required by the state of Tennessee. Any disturbance in the natural drain will require a TDEC evaluation to determine if any approval will be required. Septic and building permits will also be required if the site plan is approved. And the elevations of the structure will meet the requirements of this section, or section 7.15 of our zoning regulations. A lighting plan has not been included with this site plan, but I spoke with the applicant, and the only lighting will be under the awning of the office building. And that would just be required to be full cut off.
Any questions or comments on the site plan as it's presented in your packet?
What are the operating hours just going to be? Daily, daytime only, or I'm just curious. I've never seen many car lots that did not have lighting. I'm just curious what's going on there.
The applicant's here; he may be able to answer that.
Yeah. Would step up to the mic if you would.
With the lighting?
The lighting situation, it says the only lighting you're going to have is under the awning of the office?
Yeah, it's going to be around the awnings of the office.
Or is it daytime operation only, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Okay.
gonna be closed in the evenings.
Well, didn't know. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Yeah.
Roger, thank you for including the regs.
Yes.
Kind of,
Makes it a little easier that way.
yes. Do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? And a second. Are there any further comments, discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Site plan is approved. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Preliminary and final plats, minor subdivisions. Re-subdivision of Track 4 of the estate of Harry Webb off of Keener Road, 3 lots along the county road. Let him introduce first.
The outstanding items to be completed are on page 2, and I will read those into the record. I want to make a comment before you vote. Number 1, access areas to be identified on the final plats, and a note added that no other driveways for each lot shall be allowed along Keener Road. Number 2, signature plats and a $20 per lot platting fee. If you look at lot 4-3, there's an existing easement on it. We just want to restrict that lot to have only that one driveway at that location, because that easement is to the benefit of someone behind them. 4-2, the highway department and myself have indicated a location for the driveway, which will be close to that easement. It'll be on that side of the property. The further you go down the road, the way that the whole property is forested, and you can pull out beyond it and see down the road, but you can't see around the curve with the trees. I don't think they want to take them all out, so, and that's probably the best place to put a driveway. If they have, I think it should be on the plat. You know, if they have some real reservation about that for some reason in the future, I think it would be best if they came to the planning commission, because they'd probably have to make quite a tree clearing. I can only measure like 200 feet, and we require 230 feet on that speed of road. Lot number 4-1 has a new driveway that someone recently put in with a new tile. We just want to limit it to that location as well and no others. I mean, it's a little greater area than just the driveway itself. It's about 60 feet wide, so they'll have some choice. But because it's so forested there, you can't really see around that curve very well.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that.
All right. Commissioner McClellan.
I just wanted to say I have to abstain on this vote, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Let the record note that Commissioner McClellan is abstaining, but we'll answer any questions if you have them. Any questions or thoughts for Doug or Commissioner McClellan? If not, do I have a motion? Do I have a motion? And a second. If there's no further questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Doug?
Okay.
Item 2.
Number 2, page 3, you have the subdivision of the R.L. Webb estate off of Middle Settlements Road by Patsy Webb. There are 3 lots, 2 with county road frontage and 1 lot served exclusively off of a 25-foot common driveway easement. Since the driveway easement only serves 1 lot exclusively, which is lot 3, lot 2 actually has road frontage, our requirements we don't require that they build the common driveway for this plat, nor install the utilities, because they can all be served from the road. Outstanding items to be completed are on page 4. A maintenance agreement for lots 1, 2, and 3 shall be supplied to staff prior to releasing the final plat. And number 2, signature plats and a $20 per lot platting fee.
Do we have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
One comment, if you don't mind, Mr. Stuckey. I went down there and looked at this. When you're looking from 3 all the way forward, they are a house on both front lots.
Say that again.
There's a house over here and a house over here. The Patsy Webb, where her name is, that's where her residence is. That house is not drawn on that piece of property. Okay, and that goes, and then the house to the left is the original old farmhouse. So there's actually 2 houses here.
Okay.
And so I make a motion to approve with the staff recommendations.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Bruce. Any more comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
I have one last item, the item you added to the agenda. It's actually under the hearings. It'll be item C, preliminary and final plat, major subdivisions. You saw this plat last month. I've included the index sheet again for you, except Marlene was nice enough to highlight the lot locations. You see we did not highlight lot number 6. Previously there were 6 lots approved by the Planning Commission, and now we are down to 5 at this time. The intent is for the owner and the surveyor is to do potentially 4, maybe more lots, and they'll have to come to the Planning Commission as a group instead of piecemealing them in. I reported to you last time that the Environmental Health Department was reviewing the plats and prepared to sign them. That was true, but it was I never got the soil information because they're individual lots. They took them to Mr. Ferguson. He was in the review process, and after the fact, he's quite delayed in his work right now. He's kind of overloaded. So when he got to looking at it, he realized that a lot of the soil, although it was fine, it was not on the lots itself. 3 of the lots actually are to have off-site septic areas, and those are identified. They were not identified on the previous plats, and we thought that was a major design change, so it had to come back to the Planning Commission for clarification, at least to the Planning Commission, so that you knew what you approved last time versus what they're showing us this time. Okay. I put a note in here, and I guess I'll mention it. The subdivision regulations don't clearly state that a lot has to have its septic on that lot. But the mere fact that we have minimum lot sizes is because of the capability of the soil for septic. Lots are a lot smaller if we put them on sewer. So I guess, in a sense, the regulations are built around the fact that septic is going to, when you have septic, that lot will support what the house that you put on it, on site instead of off site. But it doesn't say that explicitly. In the recent past, we've approved plats mostly to fix them where there's been an existing house on a lot. And then, for whatever reason, someone found out the septic was over here and had to repair it. And Gary comes to us and says, Gary Ferguson comes to us and says, these people can fix it, but they got to buy the property from the neighbor. And then it can all be done, but it has to be done with an easement. So we've done that. The Planning Commission has done that several times. However, we haven't approved undeveloped lots before with off-site septic area. I want to be real clear, though, we don't have a problem with it, and I can't find clearly in the regulations where we can't do it, and unless John has something to add. So let's just take a look at the lots together real quick so we all know what we're looking at, and then we will go to the outstanding items. Number 1, lot number 1 has septic area attached to it. I guess I'm going to get some indication from the surveyor why they don't just add that to the lot. If that be the case, if they can add it to the lot, we'll have them do that. Otherwise, it is what it is. And I want to mention too that the off-site septic is all contained within the golf course, which at the current time is the same owner as the owner developing the lots.
But it would be a permanent easement
Yes.
written
That's,
in,
the previous drawing didn't have those.
right, exactly.
And so Gary was
Understand.
signing the plats and said, well, I kind of need an easement. And so we agreed with him.
And does
Number two,
the
Okay,
septic area on lot 1 is outside the boundaries of that property?
yeah, the long triangle below the shorter, rectangle below the lot 1 is outside of the lot line, yes.
So that
But it
area,
is attached.
it's attached
Yeah,
in this
it's
particular,
joined.
in this particular instance, there would be an easement of 27,630 square foot easement for field drain or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think we need to clarify that it's going to be a septic area easement, the word easement on there, and put some additional language on there as well.
Yeah,
Easements for a lot of things are common. I mean, you could have an easement for
Yeah.
a variety of reasons. This is just another one of them. That's what I was trying to explain.
Yeah, we have had some before, and I also dealt with a similar situation out in Townsend. So we actually wrote easement. Right.
Right, as long as it's, and that's the problem, the easements weren't on the last round. I didn't put them in here for comparison, but the easements weren't there.
and I may be getting ahead of myself, but I can see this where the property attaches the particular plot in question for the easement, but where it doesn't, where it's down the road, and I don't know how, I didn't see the distance on these that aren't adjoining the piece of property. I guess my question, you answered one of them, is it the same owner? We're gonna be setting a precedent right here by doing this, because we've not done this before, right? And what's...
You haven't done it in an undeveloped lot situation. You've done it to fix.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We're setting a precedent right now, if we approve this, the way I'm looking at it. I'm just curious if we're gonna run into problems down the road when this happens, if the owners aren't the same. And I guess,
Well, they're not gonna be the same. That's the intent, is to sell the lot to someone
I
else.
understand, but right now, the owner is the
owner's-
same person that's developing the property.
And they're fully willing to encumber their golf course with these septic easements, knowing in the future, someone might be out there digging on their golf course when another owner buys it. They know that.
Let me just give you an example of something that's similar in situations out in the rural area where we have a private utility. The private utility, we still require minimum lot size, and we have a private utility that has a separate processing unit, and the lines go from the house along an easement to that processing unit, which is owned by the utility. Now, that is off-site. That's off the lot. It's still connected. It still takes care of the waste. The idea of taking care of the waste is the big issue here, and making sure that a property owner of a lot, in a situation where it's a separate septic tank and a field line, that he has control over repairing that facility. So we've done that here. The reason we used to say that it had to be taken care of on the lot itself was just a kind of a matter of practice. But one time we got challenged and said, show me in your regulations where that's required, and we couldn't find it. So we had to relent and say that, yes, this sounds like it's something that'll work, just so long as you take care of the effluent and you have control over that property in at least an easement. So we've done that.
I guess my next question is the size of the easement. Is there anything in our regulations that states what the size of the easement has to be?
The size is controlled by Mr. Ferguson. The lot has a minimum lot size.
I
So all these
understand
lots,
that.
all the lots meet the minimum lot size, and then Gary has to determine, that's what he does with the soil maps. They go out there, find him the good soil. He just identifies the size of the easement by what he needs to accommodate a 3-bedroom unit on that house. So it's pretty much a standard size, unless there's something on that little tract that he doesn't want to mess with, and
I
he makes
guess
it
what
bigger.
I'm looking at is where the septic field is detached from the piece of property, the easement going from the piece of property to the septic field.
Accessibility to it.
Pardon?
The accessibility to that
Right,
easement.
I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, we hadn't got that far yet. I was gonna talk
Okay.
about it. We'll just go through the lots,
Okay.
like I said. Number 2, you'll see there's a septic area easement of 18,000 feet, and that's a property boundary with another property, Fox Chase subdivision in Laurel Valley. I've explained to Rick Younger, the surveyor, and he's going to do it. They're gonna put a 10-foot access easement, and it'll be labeled an access easement, so they can actually physically cross that with equipment in order to install and fix the unit, or whatever they use, whatever their septic system is. Lot number 3 has a 25-foot easement to drive to the lot, but the lot is self-contained and the septic area is identified in there, and Gary wanted it. He does that sometimes. He'll shade part of a lot. In this case, they just dashed a line to show that they don't want the house built in that area. Number 4, it's a little trickier. You'll see the lot 4 with a big giant work shed, and then you have a septic area of 19,000 feet, which is next to the cart path. I explained to Rick that he needs to provide some kind of access easement. They're thinking about bringing it off of Laurel Road, and he'll have to show the extension of Laurel Road going south, and then come to the access easement that way. Either way, it's across the golf course, you know. But like I said, it'll be a 10-foot wide strip of land to get to that area, identified on this plat before we sign it. Number 5, you'll see this is similar to the last one. You cross the cart path and you see the septic area to the left of the property, and I think they're going to simply add a 10-foot access easement instead of just tying it with a line. And I've been very clear to Ricky, he just hadn't had the time to do it because I kind of dropped this bomb on him yesterday. So that's where we're at. I don't know if John has something to add.
I think, and I'm not sure exactly where the line will be from the lot to the septic area, but that needs to be subject to an easement too if you have to repair that.
Yes.
So not only access, but the line connecting the house site to the septic area needs an easement. So so conditions would be identifying a 10-foot access easement and identifying an easement for the line connection itself.
And theoretically, or hopefully, those will be the same. They could be the same.
But the line, but just drawing a 10-foot easement to that area, it's got to also be accessible. I mean, you could draw a line down a hill, and then the guy couldn't
Yeah,
get to
we'll make sure they can get it, access it with a backhoe or something.
Commissioner McClellan?
Standardly, what you do is you'll put a note on there that it'll be a 10-foot easement along the as-built line. When it's put in the ground, that's where the easement will be.
Okay.
And it should be tied down at that point, some way.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And also, on 3, I'll bring up what I brought last month. You just got that going out to a point in the road, and don't say where it is at the road.
So we need a tie point,
Something up at Country
something to
Club
tie it
Drive,
to
somewhere.
Country Club Drive.
Yeah.
Commissioner French?
One last question. The areas adjacent to these septic areas, are we restricting any kind of development on them
No.
by putting septic tanks in the off-site?
I mean, it's a golf course now. If they want to keep cutting lots off of it, then those lots will be impacted by what they've done previously. So they'll have to either move their septic somewhere else or make it bigger or avoid these areas.
Okay.
I've got to read the outstanding items to be completed.
Okay.
And let's see, number 1. There'll be a note added to each plat that all driveways and home construction must utilize erosion control measures on all exterior boundaries during and after construction until the individual lots have been revegetated. Note number 2, show access easements to septic area easements on the final plat for lots 2, 4, and 5. In addition to the comments that John and Bruce made with respect to the actual line serving the house. Number 3, signature plats and a $40 per lot plating fee.
Just a question. I mean, these easements are going to show up on these lots, and I guess by virtue of them being recorded, what ties it back to the original plat of the golf course? I mean, because now these easements apply to the former lands.
These are the documents. I mean,
These documents then.
you don't go back and necessarily update old plats with new information. And it's over 5 acres too, so I don't know that they've ever, it's a golf course, they've probably surveyed it all at some point, but not any kind of requirement for that. It would just be a property boundary.
Okay.
Usually when you have a larger parcel and you whack stuff out of it, then that deed kind of remains the way it is. John can probably explain it a little bit better than I could, actually.
Well, these will be legally registered documents, and they'll have validity. Everybody would have to take cognizance of it if they were trying to develop the rest of the golf course or it changed hands. These easements would go with that transfer. It's just like any encumbrance you have on the land. It goes with the land itself.
All right, Doug, in your outstanding items, you said show access easements. I guess I would request, and I think it's already been mentioned, that we clearly specify on these plats, these are easements for the septic.
We're going to have septic area easements and access easements.
Okay.
And we'll work with Ricky till we get it exactly the way it needs to be recorded.
And then Commissioner McClellan's point, lot 4 or 5, whatever it was. Which lot was that, Bruce?
Lot 3 with the tie to Country Club Drive. Yes.
Yeah, the tie to some positioning to Country Club Drive.
One other thing, I don't know that it makes that big a deal, but in lot 5, there's a lot of words in there you need to check the spelling on.
Okay, we'll make them aware of that.
And I'm assuming that these easements are large enough that in case something happens to the original
They have to be big
field,
enough.
they have to be large enough to give back for future.
Three-bedroom house and duplication.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, any more questions or comments? Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second, subject to staff recommendations and the addition of comments from the commission itself, including specific identification of the easements and access easements and the tie of Lot 3 to Country Club Drive. Did I miss anything, Doug?
And the actual service line from the house to the septic.
That service line, right, as built.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. 1 no. All the site is approved. John, long range.
I think we actually had published in the paper under long-range planning discussion of commercial use along Highway 411 North, but I'll roll that into staff reports if that's okay with everybody. And what I've done is lay on your table some background notes for discussion of commercial use along Highway 411 North. Let me give you a kind of a heads up on why we're discussing it tonight. There's been some inquiry about a retail store along Highway 411 North, some exploration of sites and possibilities, and we felt that it was time to come back to the Planning Commission and discuss 411 North in context of our past plans, the conceptual land use plan, the policies plan, and also the zoning structure in the county. What I've provided you is some excerpts from the conceptual land use plan. I've provided also some underlines that have some bearing on this. In the conceptual land use plan, future concentrations of commercial land use are indicated along Highway 411 North, just past the Maryville city limits. That's the only reference to Highway 411 North in the conceptual land use plan specific. And that point is where Pellissippi Parkway Extended is expected to come through and intersect with Highway 411 North. So we figured that that would develop in commercial use. Quite frankly, if that occurs and that is built, Maryville will annex out there immediately so they can capture the tax revenue. So I don't think it's going to be under our jurisdiction for very long as far as a conceptual land use plan. However, down below in the next paragraph, the plan projects that medium to low density commercial activities will establish in other areas of the county along arterial roads and collector roads. Now that's a general statement. Highway 411 North is an arterial road, and so that might apply. We have not set a type of zone that would apply to that situation. We have not set any zone specific rezonings that would apply to 411 North, but that is in our conceptual land use plan and should be a consideration. Rural 1 land use guidance from the conceptual land use plan. All the land along 411 North past the Little River is in the R1 zone, as is 500 feet this side of the river near coming towards Maryville. The R1 zone on the next page, the paragraph before guidance from revised policy plan says only limited commercial activity is expected, particularly of medium to low density along arterial and collector status roads. So a consideration there is medium to low density. In the past, we have allowed special exception in the R1 zone, and we've limited to, we've had a limit of a minimum 1 acre of property for a commercial use and a maximum of 4,000 square feet. Am I correct on that? Right. So that's how we limited low to medium density. We had that in our regulations in R1. We had a lot of controversy down 411 South, and we took it out. So we don't have provisions now for allowing commercial uses in any, well, very limited capability of allowing commercial uses in the R1 zone along arterial types of roads. So that is a consideration. We have it in our plan. We considered that as part of a controversy in another context, and we took out that capability of special exception. So that's a possibility of putting it back in. We have guidance from the revised policy plan. Now, again, underline some sections for emphasis. Down at the bottom of the page, commercial development should be allowed throughout the county with performance standards when adjoining residential areas. We realize that once you get outside of the urbanized area, that it becomes a little bit more of a conflict, particularly with adjacent residential property, and we need to be cognizant of that. On the next page at the top, concentrate commercial zoning at key intersections and at designated development nodes. We have not done that so far, particularly along Highway 411 South, and along Highway 411 North. We might need to take a look at this a little more closely, of limiting it to certain intersections and nodes and not just having an open, wide open strip of development. Down about the middle of the page, development should be limited and density should be lower, farther from the cities, and especially in situations where there is limited infrastructure support, particularly inadequate school capacity, no sewer, and limited road capacity. The last two, no sewer and limited road capacity, apply to 411 North, particularly across the river on the other side from us. A lot of people perceive Highway 411 North to be a little bit unsafe because it is, even though it's got a pavement that is of adequate width, the shoulders are either inadequate or lacking completely, and sometimes the pavement goes out and forms a fall off of the pavement into a ditch. So that's a consideration on Highway 411 North when you think about establishing new commercial developments, particularly some major commercial developments. I've presented the present C commercial zone present C commercial zone applies to the urban growth boundary area of Maryville and Alcoa. It doesn't extend out beyond that. It is intended for an urban and very highly developed suburban type of situation, and mainly along arterial and collector status roads. The present RAC, rural arterial commercial, actually limits the applicability to adjacent to major 4 or more lane arterial roads. And that was developed in response to some commercial exploration down Highway 411 South, and that is a 4-lane facility, 4 or 5-lane facility. So what you have now is a situation where we do allow commercial along our arterial roads, but it is mainly 4-lane roads out in the rural area. And it does not apply to the 2-lane situation of Highway 411 North. What I'm coming to you tonight for is any discussion that you might have, given that we took out, in particular, special exception from our R1 zone. We used to have it in there. That would be consistent with some of the plans that we have. We have some exploration by some companies that want to establish some retail outlets along 411 North. And I think in all fairness, we need to look at this again to see if we want to reconsider how we would allow commercial activity to develop along Highway 411 North and other similar situations. So that's coming for discussion tonight. I do not have any proposal. What I want is some guidance from the Planning Commission. I would really prefer not to explore on my own the possibilities for this. If I would like to have some indication of the acceptability before I explore the possibilities.
Okay, floor is open. Commissioner McClung.
Have you ever seen any DOT plans at all for 411 North, 4-lane it or whatever, like?
No, the TDOT doesn't have any specific plans for it right now, no designs, but it is on the Transportation Planning Organization list for a major 2-lane improvement. 2-lane improvement, not 4-lane. No. The traffic along there does not warrant a 4-lane treatment, but it does, the situation of the road itself does warrant a 2-lane improvement. Widening of the lanes and providing shoulders is the main activity there.
I would think at least they ought to have a 3-lane with a left turn kind of thing.
Well, I'll leave that up to the TDOT engineers. And I'll tell you right now, the TDOT has a philosophy now of limiting their exposure. They don't build 4 lanes through rural areas anymore. They don't have enough money to do that everywhere. So they're trying to right size, that's the term they use, right size their improvements. If they can get a bang for the buck on a 2-lane improvement and provide enhanced safety and drivability and access or capacity just by widening the lanes and providing a shoulder, then that's a lot cheaper than trying to put a 4-lane in where you have to buy a whole lot of right-of-way and then put a whole lot of pavement down. So that is their philosophy now. Don't be looking for the big 4-lane improvements everywhere in the future. They just don't have enough money to do it.
Others want to speak to the question?
John, my thoughts on that is if I lived on the other side of the river and I wanted to reduce the traffic level on 411 North, if I could go a half a mile and buy a bottle of aspirin, it would reduce the traffic from driving all the way to town to do so. So, I mean, the way I look at it is I think we sort of bite our tail off sometimes to prevent things from happening for a reason that actually is not for the actual reason that we're doing it. So, you know, if like anywhere where 2 arterial roads cross, there should be some kind of a distance between those 2 intersections, or a thought would be to maybe a distance around those 2 intersections to allow more commercial at that area or something. That is just a thought for that. But, you know, if I lived on that end of town, I would welcome to have a little more retail closer to home.
That is part of the, by the way, part of the plan as far as providing that commercial at intersections. You're not going to have two arterials intersect. You will, however, have arterial and collector status roads intersecting, and that might be the point that you define those nodes that you're talking about.
Commissioner Roddy?
A question, if the extension of Pellissippi Parkway were not an active project, would we be talking about this?
I can't really say one way or the other. Pellissippi Parkway is a few years out in the future, and these people would definitely want to generate income between now and then, and they're talking about the other side of the river, so they're not talking about the major influence area of Pellissippi Parkway. I think what they've done is they've looked at the traffic along 411 North and looked at how it's beginning to increase. Actually kind of leveled off during the recession, but it has been on a trend of increase because you have a connection between Maryville and Chapman Highway and all the tourist area that goes down towards Pigeon Forge and Sevierville and Gatlinburg. So that is an area that you can expect to keep on developing in traffic, but it hasn't been the peak areas. These smaller types of retail establishments don't look for that peak. They look for their competitive niche, and I think they found that in the traffic that's already there.
Okay.
You had mentioned earlier that did we have in the regulations that was removed? You're saying we had a special exception?
Yes, we had special exception provisions with limitations that would allow retail use to establish along our arterial and collector status roads in the R1 zone.
What was the reason it was removed? Probably I'm going to speculate the same reason the RAC zone was created, because of the fear of the C word. Is that fair to say?
Pretty much. I think there were some other considerations there, but it was all balled up in that controversy down 411 South.
So a special exception would be our easiest way, if you wanted to say, for lack of better words, to control it, you could do a special exception versus having an allowable use. Would that be correct?
You can do it several different ways. You can have it as a separate zone, an RAC2, which would be like a 2-lane RAC zone, or you could have it as special exception, which would then allow it to be applied generally along any stretch of collector or arterial status road, or you can just limit to arterial, let's say. But that allows it along the whole stretch. Having it clustered in certain areas is something that could be amenable to a rezoning process, and you have to have a zone already established so you can rezone a piece of property for that. Allowing it as a special exception allows it a little bit more generally along the whole stretch.
Well, the RAC2, as you mentioned, is an example. What would be the criteria on road status for that one?
It would be up to the Planning Commission and the legislative body, the County Commission. I just mentioned that as a criteria of 2-lane. It would be like a RAC light, so to speak. In other words, when you have a much bigger facility that can take a larger amount of commercial use, you allow more uses, you allow larger. But if you have a more limited infrastructure, you reduce that size of footprint and you reduce the impact.
I personally think if we're trying to, like you said, go out into an area, as you say, proceed with caution, I think a special exception gives you a little bit more flexibility versus if you allow something and then you realize you shouldn't have done something. You can always be more, I guess you could be more, well, I guess the special exception serves that purpose.
Well, you trade off one thing. You trade off specific location through rezoning to an open length of road and allow it to occur anywhere along that road by the special exception. So it is a trade-off.
And it'd have to be continuous, correct? You couldn't do like a spot zone theory, right? That couldn't happen, could it?
Well, a spot zone means it's not consistent with a plan. If you have a plan that shows that you were going to allow that type of activity along a stretch of road and you only, let's say, rezone 2 acres, that's not a spot because it's consistent with your plan.
So essentially, I think what John is saying, we could create on the arterial the ability through special exception or some other language, whatever. The old special exception was limited, it had to be a minimum of an acre?
Had to be a minimum of an acre of land and a maximum of 4,000 square feet in footprint of building.
From your perspective, is the 4,000 sufficient? Would that accommodate?
It depends on what you want to do. A dentist office might could do that, you know, if it's one person. There are certain businesses that can be accommodated in 4,000 square feet. In fact, I think it was 4,000 square feet footprint and 2 stories. You could actually get 8,000 square feet in the building. Was that, That's correct. Okay. So, you know, that gets up to a scale of building that, yeah, you can get several shops in it.
I mean, I guess I'm kind of the mindset of what Commissioner Walker expressed. It is a long stretch from the river until you get to any business, which is all the way to basically to Seymour. And that's a long stretch of road. I grew up out in a rural area, and I used to still want to be able to walk a quarter of a mile to buy a Coke or a half gallon of milk and ice. Everybody out there has got, I mean, if you live in the middle of that, you got to drive either to Seymour, or you got to drive all the way back into Maryville before you hit the first watering spot.
Well, they do
And
have.
so I mean, I guess from my perspective, we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot in terms of trying to maintain neighborhood, because you make everybody drive the long distance. Now I understand people don't want a lot of commercial activity, but I think a good example for me is Becky's out on White's Mill. That serves a good function for that neighborhood. I mean, at least there is some place in that neighborhood that they can, when they forgot a quart of milk, they can go buy it. Or the service station there at Chehaui, across from the service center. In essence, the way we've written our regulations, we don't even hardly allow things like that to serve a neighborhood, yet we want to promote a neighborhood concept. So the old things get grandfathered and new things aren't allowed to happen.
I'm not arguing it
No,
against this.
I guess I'm just expressing a point of view.
Look how rural those buildings were, 30, 40.
Oh, absolutely.
Look how really we're back.
Yeah. I guess I say all that I'm more than happy to revisit the issue. And I guess I would, and if anybody wants to add their comments, I would request that staff perhaps come up with a proposal, whether the alternative of putting the old special exception in, and whether what we had in there as the limits are valid, but look at putting them back in. And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but does that sound reasonable, Commissioner French?
I travel that road every day when I come over here, every day. Sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. I guess what concerns me, what you've said here is what you're trying to do is collect businesses at intersections, which in essence to me is spot zoning, because you've got maybe an arterial road and a collector here, and maybe 1 mile down the road you've got another arterial and a collector there. So in essence what you're doing is spot zoning by limiting those businesses to intersections. The thing that concerns me most is unless something's done to that road, if you start putting commercial ventures out there, you're going to cause a lot of problems. By the way, because of the way people drive that road. That's bottom line.
I think, I see what you're saying, Commissioner French, but I think what we don't understand about that is those people have to have those commercial services, period. You know, it's not like that if someone in that area out there needs that commercial service, by doing that, you're just reducing the distance they have to go for the service. So they're not going to do without their milk. They're not going to do without their bread. They're still going to get it. But if we can bring it closer to them, then we're reducing the traffic on that road, in a sense.
I'd like to address the issue of spot zoning. A spot is not a spot if it is according to plan. And given that there might be some misconceptions about what spot zoning is, I will try to bring back some guidance on what a spot zone is and how you can avoid it. Basically, a spot zone is where you zone a piece of land contrary, basically, to your plan, to the benefit of the individual property owner. If you are actually trying to encourage clustering of commercial uses for the purpose of allowing the neighborhood to more easily access a commercial activity, then that is not a spot zone. That is actually according to plan, but you got to be pretty specific. Our plans now are generic and they're a little bit non-specific. It does mention intersections and clustering of commercial use. So if we were to do that, it wouldn't be a spot zone. It would actually be consistent with the plan.
Well, does that not plan, the plan not refer to the Highway 411 just past the narrow city limits?
Well, again, that was tied to Pellissippi Parkway extension in the urbanized area. Well, that one's off the board. The southern loop has been taken off the list, so that is archaic. That doesn't apply anymore. There will be no intersection down there because we don't have a southern loop on the list anymore.
I kind of somewhat agree with that spot theory you just said, but it's a spot until the first thing happens. When the first commercial use, whatever you call it, happens, then it's not a spot anymore. But I think at first it's got to be. But you're saying on plan, well, if the plan, well, that's a very argumentative plan. Everybody has their perspective of what that plan should be.
Let me put it this way.
Here's an example here of two different opinions of the same scenario. I mean, so how does that, which plan is right and which one is wrong if that's the case?
What I'm saying is technically a spot is not a spot if it's consistent with a plan. Spot zoning is a very technical term that you can get in trouble with, but if you don't, basically you're going to have to make a decision. Do you want to allow these to occur in nodes at intersections or not? If you decide to allow them in nodes and intersections, that's part of your plan. If you rezone 1 acre or 2 acres in one of those nodes, that's not spot zoning anymore. That's according to your plan.
I'm with you that it's our responsibility to develop our plan and follow our plan. I'm with you 100%. Is that our responsibility to develop that plan? Mm-hmm. The Planning Commission only, not with the approval of the County Commission or with the approval?
The planning function is purely the function of the Planning Commission. There are provisions in state law that allows the legislative body to adopt a plan, but with a caveat that once the legislative body adopts that plan, they are bound then legally to that plan.
Correct.
If they don't adopt it, all it is a guidance from the Planning Commission.
So you're saying the County Commission has to,
They do not have to adopt the plan.
Not that that's important to me, but I want to make sure we're the ones that basically come up with that plan.
It's the prime responsibility of the Planning Commission to develop and adopt plans. Yes. According to state law.
Everyone satisfied with us having John come back to us with some suggestions or not necessarily suggestions, but possibilities. Alternatives. Everyone comfortable with
when
it?
you come back, could you also have a blown up map that would, if we're talking about intersections, how many there are between point A and the county line or something that we're talking about?
Let's limit that to collector status and intersections with that, because quite frankly, a subdivision road is not really a.
Right, I agree, exactly. But, you know, so we know whether we're talking about 5 or 25.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Okay? I don't see a bunch of nays, but I don't see a bunch of yays. Okay, John.
It's like the Mennonites, when they all nod, it's a consensus. Okay, the only other thing I have is upcoming training opportunities in October and November. Don't have any in December. There's actually one opportunity that's going to come up in December, but I need to get a little more information on that. Tomorrow, from 5:15 p.m. to about 7 p.m., at 1 or more credit hours, there's a Plan East Tennessee premiere of a video, Tell Our Story, Our Legacy Matters. They're going to have hors d'oeuvres there, so if you want to skip dinner and go there and eat their hors d'oeuvres, then you're welcome to do so. And I'll be there, so if you show up, I can credit you for that. On October 29th, which is next Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. to about 4 p.m., depending on how long Mr. Holloway speaks, and he can speak quite a long time, up to 2.5 hours credit. I would think between 2 and 2.5 hours credit. This is the tour of the Solid Waste Authority facilities and Keep Blount Beautiful. Some of you have already been to that last year. I'm not going to allow you to double up. I mean, if you did it last year, it's the same thing. If you want to come again just to enjoy it, well and good, but it's going to be the same information, so I don't think we can double up on that. And Friday, November 8th, if you really want to go into it, 6 hours credit, equity in East Tennessee. Why health equity matters. I'll be a facilitator at that session, and it's going to be a little bit interactive. It's going to be informational and interactive about equity, particularly health equity in our region.
John, on the Tuesday tour, where are we meeting?
We'll meet out at the facilities. I'll have to send out a map. I understand. I've gotten requests from people to get a map. I'll send out a map to those who have signed up. Please RSVP so we will have an idea of how many people are showing up. That's for logistic planning. If you can do that to Marlene tonight, by the way, if you'd like to.
See your lights on. Tom?
I was going to, our training is however many hours on a calendar year basis, correct?
Yes.
I'm just speaking from my perspective. I always try to get my training out of the way, but as the year progresses, I don't have the urgency to want to go to some stuff. Is there any way that you could do like a rolling 12-month average? So it seemed like we're all the time trying to get stuff caught up or get whatnot. It'd be
Well,
much easier.
I have to go by state law, and it basically says during the calendar year. That's why if a commissioner comes on late in the year, we don't require him to bunch 4 hours into his calendar year because he hadn't had a full calendar year. So that was something I discussed with Norman Newton a long time ago, and he said it's a calendar year basis. So I go by that. I wish we could, because several people, get like 12, 15 hours, and they say, can we average that over several years? Well, I'm sorry, but we can't.
David?
Sorry, Gerald.
Are we done with this? Is something new? Are we done with that discussion? This weekend I just want to invite everybody down to the town of Louisville Oktoberfest this weekend. Me and my buddy that competitively barbecue cook are cooking in the barbecue contest, so come down and see us and raise some money for some good charities. Even if you don't eat ours, everybody else is donating their money to charity, and come on down and have a good time.
Good.
I think John's ate our food, so he knows it's okay.
Award-winning food.
Commissioner French?
I did have one other question concerning the 411 North discussion. You mentioned that it was on DOT's list for major two-lane improvements.
It is on the Transportation Planning Organization's list.
Do you have a time frame for that? Or?
I'd have to check on that. It's several years out. There are a lot of other projects in Blount County that are taking precedent right now.
Okay.
It's definitely not on the short list. It's on the longer range list.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you, Geneva. We are adjourned.